there is. I want to tap into one point. There's one of my favorite African Americans historically in the struggle that we face is Martin Delany, and in his book he writes a simple text, and he says that the colored people of today are not the colored people of half a century or quarter century ago. And it requires very different means and measures to satisfy their wants and demands. And what he's trying to explain in that is that we must always be ready to evolve our movements to reflect the needs of the day. And the needs of the day are not the needs of the 1900s or the 1960s or the 1980s. And what ends up happening is our movements tend to get stuck in a language that is no longer relevant for today's situation. And many people don't know that there's, when we talk about Pan-African, most people refer to Pan-Africanism as Garveyism, which is the remnants of what Marcus Garvey done, the Back to Africa movement, etc. But there always was another thread in Pan-Africanism. The W.E.B. Du Bois and the Herbert Harrisons, who did not want Black Americans to give up their identity, but to use their position in America along with those in the diaspora and on the continent to improve the conditions of those who are oppressed. So when most people argue against Pan-Africanism, they're going to argue from a position of Garveyism,
right?
The Garveyites, right. Not from the position of Hubert Harrison or W.E.B. Du Bois,
right?
And not knowing the distinctions,
right,
in their arguments misconform or at least misleads people in the conversation. In 1900, when they had the first Pan-African Conference, they were talking about scientific racism, lynching, and labor abuse. And they wanted to use a collective argument on why these things ought to be addressed. So the idea that we're talking about, going back to Africa, always been there, and I'm not going to deny that. But that's a later development that came in that may have misrepresented the total goal of what Pan-African is. So I don't disagree with him. I think he's on point with we need to reevaluate how both of us, those who are in Africa, the diaspora in America, and those on the continent, because we're no longer in the 1900s or the 1960s.
Yeah, I love how you bring up Hubert Harrison. He's the first Black Socrates that everybody know. I go by AKA Black Socrates myself. And so I love how you go to that foundation of the attention of Pan-Africanism from a Hubert Harrison, W. Du Bois standpoint. Many people are not familiar with it from that perspective. So thank you for bringing that perspective, Chill, because I think that aspect aptly applies to the moment right now, because as you said, W. Du Bois' idea was definitely there was a clear distinction by that point, right? Where it's over 250 years here at this point, 300 years at this point, so there's a clear distinction. So W. Du Bois definitely understood to, as you said, for us as African Americans in a specific culture, not to lose sight of our own culture. However, the way the world was moving, saying, hey, here's how we can kind of benefit each other based on our different positioning. That's a very different thing than the way that Garvey again, not taking any credit from him. We're just kind of making very specific distinctions of, whereas Garvey was more kind of focused on a self-esteem issue, which we had that issue as well. So again, we're not saying right or wrong, but this distinction makes a big difference. And to your point, Chill, when you bring that foundation to the table, I think it can help us have an understanding of today. So to your point, when you understand that Du Bois and Hubert Harrison was more saying, hey, we have this distinct culture, we have this situation, how do we position ourselves to help the diaspora help one another in their distinction? That's what we kind of lose sight of in current times. That's the romanticization that I think does not serve us, when we kind of think of it as we're all the same, or we should be brothers and sisters simply because we're Black. Like, that's kind of how Pan-Africanism is looked at. When I first learned it, I learned it from the Garveyite way as well. And that's what I said, as I got older and more mature, I moved away from it because I didn't understand from my perspective how practical it could be. But to your point, when you go all the way back to Hubert Harrison, then that's where, in my opinion, it can apply to today. Because what gets lost, in my opinion, I'm about to play another cut here from Yvette, when you get into the ADOS versus the Pan-Africanism, I love what Yvette and Tone are doing with the ADOS movement, because they're more focused on the legal aspect of reparations inside the country. What I don't like, just as a critique, is there's the ego involved, and you're throwing shots back and forth from an ego standpoint and misses. To me, I just wish they would stick to the messaging, because the messaging is saying, hey, we're taking a legal approach within this country in order to get reparations specifically from who colonized us in this country. Because they have the ego shots, I looked at their history, they miss that what they're saying is, if we're successful here, this is the blueprint all of you can use in your different areas, whether it's the African, that Black people in the Caribbeans. You can use this same print, this same blueprint within your country to go to your specific colonizers, right? Like, that's their real message. But because of the ego, now people are going back and forth, in my opinion, from an ego standpoint, and missing the actual practicality of them making the ADOS distinction. People are taking it as, oh, they're trying to separate from us as Africans. And the reality is, from a legal standpoint, it needs to be argued within the country based on the government itself. That's their real point. But now it's turned into a back and forth as if we dislike each other. And unfortunately, as I said, I'll say this one more time, I think Yvette plays into it with calling people stupid and things of that nature. People are not going to hear you when you start name calling. That's just, again, my personal critique, and not necessarily about her. But I think that we've lost sight of the real legal beauty of what they're doing with the ADOS movement. They always say it, but the name calling, it gets lost in that. Let me play this cut, and you're going to hear some.
Can I say something real quick, Montoya?
Go ahead. Yeah, please. Go ahead and say something.
Quick. So, first of all, it's arrogancy on both sides. African Americans should not be in Africa telling them what they should do with their government. They should either, offer advice or offer a hand. But you can't tell a whole group of people in their own country what the hell they should do. On the other side, just because there's a title Pan-Africanist and it brings us together aesthetically, okay, and we fall under that banner, doesn't mean that you can come to America and tell African Americans, which is their own group, right, what they should do and how they should do it. You should offer up advice. You should be there as support. They even say lead, follow, get out the way. Either you with me or against me. So yeah, that back and forth is very. And then the new moves, the FBA added into the split, which is crazy by Tariq to do that. Mm-hmm. He did that for marketing purposes only, right? Business model, okay, and it split it away. So all that, it shows how we're not ready yet. That's what it is, because there can be a conversation about our reparations in America, then there can be another conversation of how to set that forth in other countries that was affected by colonialism. Like, it's the craziest thing ever. It's like we crabs in a barrel at this point. So yeah, I find that to be a high level ridiculous.